This is part two of Kev Khan's fundamentals for Platonic Surrealism. And hey, Kev, how are you doing? Before I launch into too much, it kind
Hey,
of
friend
feels
Mike.
like it's like Kev and Mike's excellent adventure on some level.
I thought that very thing, but it's not bogus at all.
It's pretty rad though. Um, I love some of the
Excellent.
right. Beethoven. I love Socrates. Um, but there is something of that in this. So Kevin put together uh, for our study group. He put together an outline, which I've read. I read it this morning, and Kevin and I are going to talk through that briefly. Um, so, Kev, you're feeling okay today?
Yeah, I'm fine. And yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I stayed up and watched a rerun of a Saturday Night Live last night, so I was disappointed it wasn't a new one. But I'm fresh this morning.
Good.
So let me ask you just to get going. So I read your outline, and one of my questions is that so Platonic Surrealism, as you call out in your outline, has correlates with Tibetan Buddhism, for example, is one system, and you kind of you correlate terms, your awareness and potential to terms in Tibetan Buddhism. So why create a new system?
Good question. And this is a framework, by the way. I'll stick by that. I've been calling this a framework since the first day we met. You see, a system tends to be something that somebody puts together because they want to convince other people to think like them so they can feel more secure, or start a spiritual movement or a religion or some nonsense. And I don't want to do any of those things. I'm just an old Minnesota farm boy here. And but yeah, I know. I'm an old country doctor and all that sort of things. Um, I love media references so much.
I'm
Uh,
just a country boy a long way from home.
okay, well you're the music guy. Yeah, yeah. So you see, my position is that a lot of the elements that seem to be in common between Platonic Surrealism and other systems are only on the periphery um, in common. And the reason I come up with new words is that the old words are hopelessly corrupted with thousands of years of cultural conditioning, expectations, etc. So if you want to put something out there that's a radically more clear clarification, you almost have to come up with new words and hopefully better words. Um, the stories that we've been telling as humans for thousands of years have been pretty shitty. Let's be honest about it. Um, Mostly it's been about suffering and how to avoid it. That's what,
Hmm.
either you create some angry God to damn your enemies to hell because, somebody picked on you once. And so you want to go get your sky daddy to beat up on people and kill them and put them in hell. And that's a dominant world religion. And half the people in the world believe that somewhat. Well, that's ugly. That's a bad story. It kind of springs from the worst parts of human nature. So we got to tell better stories.
Hmm.
And even the systems out there that have elements of beauty to them, like I'm a big fan of Zen, and I'm a the simplicity, and really you need to do some of the stuff in Zen to get yourself ready for something like Platonic Surrealism, and in the practices there are practices similar. But to answer your question, I tend to ramble. Uh, the words need to be redefined to be part of a better story. Because if I were to go, well, you got to say this prayer, and then you got your soul and your spirit, and then you'll go to heaven, just so that I use words people understand, they'll think, oh, he's just talking Christianity or this or that or this or that, and I'm not. Um, you know, there was one thing I really wanted to get out in this conversation with you today, the biggest difference between Platonic Surrealism and everything else. Now, you know some of the difference. For example, Platonic Surrealism says everything is surreal. There is nothing that is objective, and there is not a higher, there's not a lower. There's potentiality, there's awareness, and then all the dream states that come out of it. And then we all, as I hate to use this term, but it's true, as co-creators, we follow unconsciously this purposeful deception. All of us, it's baked into all living things. To follow this deception, we put out of our mind what we are, where we came from, because if we didn't, we couldn't create the movies that we create and be the characters in the movies and enjoy the movies and enjoy meeting each other as dream characters in movies together. So most narratives, and this was like you asked me last week, is this about enlightenment? And I said, no, enlightenment is mental illness. But that wasn't just a snark. That was exactly correct. You see, enlightenment is this thing where you think you're on this kind of cosmic treadmill, and if you put in 1 trillion lives or something, then you get a big poobah hat, and you get to wear a funny hat like the Pope or whatever, and people bow down to you. Or at the very least, you escape from suffering and pain and, samsara, the wheel of life and suffering and incarnation. So there's this implicit assumption, if you're a spiritual person, that you're here to evolve and to get the hell out of here, so to speak, to escape it. And then you can have some, like Buddhist Pure Land or heavenly type existence that's up, above all this. Well, here's the deal, and I referenced this last week too. If only one being exists, and that's basically the situation, one being exists, and everything that in the world of appearances, everything that appears to be real is due to this one being, well, you can't run away from yourself. That's the thing that you learn. You can apparently run away from yourself for eons. You come to a world like this and you live, you play the characters,
But
and in a
who's
sense,
the
you're
you?
running away from,
Who's the you in
yeah,
that case?
right. Ultimately, it's potentiality and awareness, but from the very, very beginning, those monads came to be. The individual unit of primal awareness and ability to be a being. And so the monads, they're born and they got the ability to do anything, almost very nearly anything. But strangely enough, they don't have the knowledge and experience that you might expect because they haven't lived yet. So they have to live. And,
But did they have to? I mean, why is there a have to?
well, I'm glad you asked. So my memory, after I became aware, was this giant discordant noise and suffering and pain from all the other monads that were waking up. And they were clashing off of each other, and they didn't know shit from Shinola any better than I did. So it's like I'm an autistic. And one of the main things about autism is sensory overload. Everything was too bright, too much, too fast, all at once. And that was one of my first memories that I had when I was like maybe 14. I get these flashes where I was like somewhere else when I was, and I've had them my whole life, but I had quite a few when I was young. And here I was, Minnesota farm boy. I had to pick the cow turds off the cow pies off my shoes if I stepped into one, had the electric fence, which, yes, I had to pee on it. Every farm boy does it at least once. So just this regular guy, right? I mean, yeah, I was a smart kid, smartest kid in school, number one student, that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, this stuff came to me. And it felt like it was me talking to me. That's the thing about mystical experience. How you tell the difference between something beautiful and true and some BS is if it feels like it's you talking to you, but one of the yous is like 10,000 feet tall and just incredible, then there's us. Our roles are very humble in this world. I don't know if you notice. At least I can say my role is pretty humble. I'm a retired guy. I'm a husband. I have a puppy. I mean, it's exciting. It's wonderful, but I'm not creating any world empires or anything.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but nor am I. But did you say that experience, was that a bilocation experience that you said you experienced yourself being somewhere else? Can you elaborate on that?
It's like a near-death experience or out-of-body experience, except for it's a Gnostic experience, it would be called, where there's just no awareness of your body anymore, and you are just at a different part of your timeline, so to speak, is what it is. The whole world browns out, goes away, and then the vision and you are one and the same, and it's not a vision, it's a memory from another time of your life. Of the existence of your monad, I guess you'd say more technically.
Does that, so there's a lot of presupposition. There's this dependence on this idea of the monad as you use it. So there's some scaffolding that we have to accept, right? To accept.
It's a framework, and on the site, platonicsurrealism.com, it's one of the first documents. Don't even remember what I named it. Let me go find it here.
I mean, monads. When I think monads, I think Leibniz, and you're familiar. I know you are with Leibniz use of the term monads. How is it different in your case?
It's well, I don't know what he did. See, that's always the kind of weird thing about my creative process. People assume, oh, I went off and read up on, I call him Leibniz. I don't know if it's Leibniz. I have no idea. They assume I go off and like secretly read Plato or something, or all these great minds, and then I copy them. Well, no, I barely know they exist. I barely know their names. And years go by and all this stuff comes up that seems to have all but been written by them in some cases. Like I had a Nietzsche phase where I saw a dog being abused and I almost died. I broke down. And then I realized, oh, that was Nietzsche in the horse. As he was hanging around, so to speak. And that's also part of Platonic Surrealism, by the way. We're all here together with this,
Yeah, and it's the messiness of words. So in general, and when you use words like potential and awareness, they too are loaded with other people there's a bias coming into those words. Right. Can you tell us about, now I've read it, but just for everyone else, can you tell us what you mean by awareness and potential, and how it's used differently, and it's fundamental to Platonic Surrealism?
Right. We did that in the last episode, but I can repeat it. You can't repeat it enough, and I will answer your question. There's a document on the website called Falsifying Platonic Surrealism, and basically in there's three premises. Number one, that things can potentially exist. That's a premise. Nobody will argue that premise. Nobody. So it's like there's no weight or baggage that, oh my God, I'll have to accept that things could potentially exist. The second premise is not as solid as that, but nobody really will argue it much except for the details. Awareness exists. Now, in Platonic Surrealism, awareness, and here I'm answering your question too, but we'll circle around again. Awareness is simply the ability to be aware. And I'm saying it's like a cosmic field that's above all other fields, like a field of physics. So strictly that can't be proven, but since, I think therefore I am, nobody can argue that. Everyone's aware that they have awareness. The premise that Platonic Surrealism says there's a universal field of awareness, and that it's a set of properties that is a subset of the set of all properties, which is potentiality. There's just not a lot to argue with there. Now, where the argument does begin is tier 3. All the dirty details come out in tier 3, because potentiality is just like a form of the philosophical system of eternalism. It simply says the potential for all properties and the potential for all potential interactions between all these properties is eternal and the only true thing that exists. The next statement is that awareness is simply the ability to perceive, and it springs as potentially the first thing that's not pure potentiality, but it is so close, because without awareness, nothing can exist. Now, of course, in potentiality, nothing has to exist, right? It's the potential to exist. And that's why it's stable. It's so stable, because you could say, well, what came before the potential exists? Like the theists want to do when they fight with the atheists. Well, the potential to exist is eternal. There is no before a potential to exist.
What's an example of
So
potentiality, though? Like matter, energy?
anything that you can come up with is a pattern in a set of, it's like a giant cookbook. It's like all the DNA of all reality, it's like in physics, there's mass, there's charge, there's momentum, there's this, there's that, there's red, there's blue. Those are descriptions, and those are bad examples. Actually, that goes more towards something Plato would have said. He wants to sneak in all the time, finish his work,
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like, that phase. So you could say, numbers. You could say, though they're a lower level too. But if the way to describe potentiality is simply the core potential. How can I describe this better than I already have? It's so obvious. Well, it's obvious to me. You don't understand potentiality yet?
Well, I'm asking the dumb questions. I mean, are
No such thing.
they sound like they sound something like forms, the way you're kind of describing them. And then awareness is awareness. It draws out from potentiality. It draws out.
Yep.
So
It's looking back at itself, where it came from. It's
okay.
looking back at all the potentials.
It's the universe suddenly becoming aware of itself.
Correct. That's all it is. And everything else, you see, potentiality is tier 1, awareness is tier 2, because you can't build anything until you have logical structures that can interact with each other. And for logical structures to interact with each other, there has to be awareness. There has to be the ability to make a framework out of all those properties. And that's part of awareness. And interestingly enough, and this is a secret about, and this is way off, but I want to get it out. It's so powerful. Actually, like Harper said, um, one of the references for the paper, the human ego actually has a direct line to awareness. And in spiritual systems, they all want you to denigrate the ego, to minimize the ego, to let the ego die. Well, the ego is what opens the doors. Ego first existed the first instant, the first awareness arrived. That was cosmic ego, so to speak. Now, human ego, in the East they call it the jiva. Freud and Jung, whatever, they'll talk about the human ego, the human personality matrix, that sort of thing. It's just a reflection, but it does have a direct connection to awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people live these hurting, depressed, meaningless lives, even in spirituality often, because they think they're supposed to dismantle their ego, but the ego is what is trying to live in the world. It's the key to understanding potentiality. Now,
Without an ego, you're saying you can't be aware. I hear what you're
you can't.
saying. So if you're pure collective unconscious, you're just in a kind of you're in a netherworld of pure dream state, or this
Pretty dreaming,
you
even.
haven't pretty what? I'm sorry.
Pretty dreaming, even. Not even dreaming
Yeah.
yet. It takes an ego to dream. You
Mm.
can't go to the landscape without being part of the landscape to experience it. So, yeah, it's really lonely not to have anything exist, but only the potential for things to exist. So, let me get to the big point I want to make sure was in the video, please.
Yeah.
So, what the spiritual systems and religions do is they tell you it's possible to escape. Well, Platonic Surrealism doesn't say that, because you can't escape from yourself. That was the big point. So, I mean, if you are a representative, if you are a component, if you are actually potentiality and awareness itself, and you're having a little dream experience here of being alive, and you're trying to forget it so you can have fun, because, puppies are fun. My puppy is so fun. But if I was lolling around as potentiality, that puppy I couldn't interact with that puppy. Puppiness is a state of properties and interactions that's potentially there, but you have to have awareness or it isn't there.
Does the puppy have awareness?
Everything's got awareness. Even rocks have awareness. And then people go, oh, you're a panpsychist, and that's not respected. More specifically, I better clean that up. Everything has the potential for awareness. So even rocks, because rocks are part of a palette, which originally came from a monad, which let itself expand out and create a space for others to come and make videos about it, etc. So that's why there's the potential for awareness even in a rock. But it's not a very good rock if it's thinking. So to play its role, the rock doesn't think. But now, I don't want to go roundy. Does a dog have the Buddha nature? And that's the old argument. Really, you kind of have to have and I'm so hard on Christianity because, Christianity led to the death of maybe 100 million innocent people, and then they want everyone to forget that fact. All the native peoples all around the world were slaughtered, either directly or via disease. at least marginalized, or languages taken from them, Christianity jammed down their throat against their will because maybe they were hungry. They didn't want a Bible, they wanted food, but no, food wasn't generally available, but Bibles were by God. So anyway, I'm so hard on monotheism in general because it's just a worship of the human ego magnified to unlimited proportions. That's what it is. And that's the difference between religion and Platonic Surrealism, actually. I would make the bold claim that Platonic Surrealism, of course, everyone says their stuff is inspired, right? But instead of a human being trying to dress up his ego in some God image, Platonic Surrealism says, you know, all images are games that are played, and they all are of equal value. They're ontologically equivalent. So don't worship one particular idea. And you could say, oh, Platonic Surrealism is an idea. Well, yeah, but it aims to point at itself, so that if you knew nothing else but potentiality and awareness, and I am also that, if that's all you knew, that would be enough. That would be enough. It's pretty bare bones. So, yeah, in Platonic Surrealism, the real takeaway, at the end of the day, is yeah, it's possible for people to participate in a larger life that's out there, which includes UFOs and all different worlds and beings and thoughts and states, the highest states, the lowest states. It's all out there, and it can all be played with. It can all be experienced. But you can't run away from yourself. Like in Jainism, they believe that the ultimate thing to attain is to become this sphere, which, by the way, is brilliant. It's just kind of true. Um, the self is seen as a sphere in a lot of different things, and including in ufology. So they want to make it a nuts and bolts thing when it's a living thing. But anyway, and then the highest attainment is to have the sphere rocket up to the near the vault of heaven, or however they would put. I'm sure I'm butchering Jainism, unmercifully. But and then you can know peace. Well, I'm afraid Platonic Surrealism doesn't agree with that, because even if you do such a thing, and yeah, I mean, I kind of did that thing, right? In the document, I talk about that very thing, generating a cosmic child that then rocketed away. It did. It rocketed away. But then it had to come back. See, when I was a kid, I had a vision, so to speak, a Gnostic experience where I was vaulted out of my body and I was the experience. That there was like these cosmic string fragments, that's like from physics. And I know the scientists go, oh, ground, here's another mystical guy, he doesn't know his science. He's using our sacred words from our religion, scientism, and we hate you. It's like quantum mysticism and all that. They just hate it. It's a metaphor, folks. It's a metaphor, okay? I can use other people's stuff as a metaphor. But these like vast streams in reality, and on one end, it was like they were pure awareness, but the other end, it's like they were rooted in deepest matter. So yeah, you can rocket to the end of yourself that seems to be pure awareness, and it's there, but you're still attached in all the works, all the activity that pure awareness froths up in the sea, the giant sea, metaphorically speaking, of potentiality, and it generates mind. See, mind is a tier 3 phenomenon. You asked me about that last week. Is everything mind? No, it isn't. Mind is number 3 on the list of this system framework. And so the other end of the tail, so to speak, of what we are is frothing up all this stuff, all these complete forms, all these incomplete forms, all these movies and experiences and universes and beings. And there's nowhere to flee. Some people try to flee into matter, you know. They go, oh, matter is all that exists. You know, that's scientism, the worship of science, and taking off the table all this other stuff that really needs to be discussed. Or you can, you know, you can do non-dualism and you try to fly away to the other end of the string and, you know, become a not self like in Buddhism, or become, you know, only Atman, you know, from Hinduism consciousness. You can try that. But the time will come, no matter which end of the string you try to flee to, you will get tugged back in the other direction. You cannot run away from yourself. You are two things. You're the pureness of potential that just can't resist playing around with shit too. So you're the brush, you're the palette, you're the paint, you're the painting, you're the whole shebang. You can't run away from it in any direction. You know, you might spend 1,000,000,000,000 years in rarefied awareness. I did that one time. I have a memory of it. On the other hand, I remember 1,000,000,000 years where I was in the deepest physical hellhole imaginable. I thought I really deserved to be there. All these memories of parallel lives. There is no reincarnation, for example, in Platonic Surrealism. There's parallel lives. You know, the monads have streamers that go into all sorts of lives, living and you know, from other times, other places on the palette of creativity. So our great challenge, I would say, as human beings, is not to bury yourself in matter, not to bury yourself in the most rarefied, let's call it spirit or awareness or maximize holiness, whatever nonsense you want to call it. You know, it's like we both like the expression samsara and nirvana are one. And it's really true. So our goal is to learn to be at the center of everything, realizing that we are everything. You know, I am also that. I am also that. That's a practice in Platonic Surrealism. I believe there was a famous Hindu master that said, you know, I am that was his statement. Like, I can't say these guys' names. I don't know Sanskrit. I can't pronounce any words. I was a hermit for about 60 years. I didn't talk to anybody really. Nisargadatta, whatever. Some of the really famous and cool sages came out of India would say, you know, I am that. But that's only half the picture. It's I am also that. I am both ends of the string. And you know what happens when a string rejoins its ends to each other? It becomes the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. And that, my friend, is like the first moment when you're first born as a monad. You haven't created anything yet because you haven't unbound your tail from your mouth. You haven't frothed anything up yet. And that's the primal state. That is the most stable and unstable states, both, at having your tail in your mouth, being the Ouroboros. Well, anyway, do you see the big difference, Mike? And you could say no. Maybe I didn't describe it well, or maybe you disagree, and that's all cool. There's such a difference between Platonic Surrealism and all these systems.
I mean, I do see some differences. Yeah, for sure. When you're saying, you know, when you say I am that, I think it's implied that I am also that. You know, I think at least. Um, and what you're describing, I mean, it sounds like what you're describing is this balance of but it's beyond that too. And I mean, we may want to stop here, but there's this balance of um, awareness and what the Buddhists call nothingness. So exploring this concept of nothingness, but uh, you're not getting hung up on that only. Am I correct in that? You're not getting hung up on this notion of only nothingness. You're extending it further. Um,
Yeah, Maya is important. Maya simply means to measure. And all the systems make Maya bad and evil and to be avoided, to be transcended. No, it's play product. It's why we're here. It's why we exist at all. We want it. We make it happen. We do it. Now, you could do Maya skillfully or you can do it unskillfully. And that's really one of the main features of Platonic Surrealism is you can learn to play skillfully, to minimize suffering, maximize effectiveness, and that's as close to a spiritual practice as there is in Platonic Surrealism, to both realize your fundamental nature and to gain skill. You know, there's a whole sheath of practices in Platonic Surrealism for gaining the ability to kind of decouple from your body, not to leave it, but to be aware of which end of the tail, so to speak, you know, is where. If if you stick your head in the sand and you don't realize what sand is like, and you don't understand what heads are like, if you're just in delusion's a bad word, ignorance. If you're in a state of ignorance, that leads to a lot of suffering. But if you gain the ability to stick your head in any sand you want, in any head you want, in any sand, any movie, that's the sort of thing that is very stabilizing because you don't feel that you're at the mercy of all these good and evil forces and heavens and hells and shoulds and shouldn'ts. Either you live skillfully and as a whole being or you don't. That's what it's about.
one thing I'd like to end on, if that's okay, and maybe just some brief explanation of it. You say that most people don't seem to realize that they are, among other things, generating this dream substance with their bodies. It's
Right,
caused by awareness and potentiality playing through the human form. They don't
right,
have to be aware. Then you say they don't
right.
have to be aware. So does that mean you could mindlessly kind of be in the experience of things and not know it?
Well, most people would snark on others and say, well, most people, they live in a, vapid state of unawareness. If you were one of those type of spiritual teachers, I'm not a spiritual teacher. And the reason I'm not a spiritual teacher is I don't want to be just one thing. I want to be a puppy daddy. I was a nuclear engineer for 7 years. I was a computer engineer for 31 years. I do this and that and this and that. I visit any world I want, so to speak. Not this Kevin, but other Kevins. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not one thing. And that's where, it's like enlightenment. And I know I'm getting a little off track, but enlightenment is, oh, I'm one thing. I'm enlightened. And I try to walk around in a daze of this enlightened state. But you'll wind up with endocrine system collapse trying to do that stuff. It's a known thing. The body has to dance with the spirit, so to speak.
Hmm.
Did I answer your question?
I actually don't think so. At
Okay,
least
well,
not.
let's try it again. Let's
Yeah,
try it
I mean,
again.
just that I can. You're saying that people don't have to be aware to have this experience, even though you're saying that people don't seem to realize that they are, among other things, generating the stream substance with their bodies. It's caused by awareness potentiality playing through the human
Right,
form. They don't have to be. So are you
right.
saying that you don't have to be aware, or am I just reading it wrong?
Okay. Well, at the risk of extending the video out a few more minutes, I want to share another experience I had. It was a regular work day. This is back before I retired. And Suddenly I looked up and 3 hours had passed. And I realized that I had missing time. Like in the UFO stories, I had missing time. And so since I was working remotely for the state of California, um, I looked at my Teams and my Slack and all this, and I had been busily working for 3 hours. But 3 hours of time passed, and I wasn't even aware of it. So this is key. This was the key thing that I was shown by myself about Platonic Surrealism. The movie will go on whether we're aware of it or not. And the watcher of the movie awareness doesn't even have to be present to experience the movie. Now, these movie seats in the theater are rare and precious in a manner of speaking. So I don't believe in zombie humans, or as they call them, non-player characters in a simulation. And only there's like three, maybe only one, maybe you're a solipsist. I'm the only one that exists and everyone else is a fraud. No, I'm not saying that. I've not experienced that. I'm simply stating that the movie will go on with or without you, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay,
that makes
it's like some of the
uh,
Hindu saints would say, the body is a suit of clothes. A lot of them talk that way. A lot of traditions have talked that
mhm.
way, and it's true. I mean, I say you should respect the body because it's a rare and special opportunity to have fun, learn, experience. It's very precious.
Mhm. There also there's a Hindu story, and I don't want to go too much into it, but when you think you're in the state of knowing, beware. When you think you're in the state above other, people in their mundane existences, and you're a guru functioning at a higher level. Um, so it's tricky, right? Isn't it? And I know you're very cautious to say, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a spiritual teacher. You're sharing your observances and the things that are you say the muse is asking you to the way a writer, as I am, you're called upon to express these things to communicate with other people. And it's not, I'm not trying to
That's all it.
convince, so I'm not trying to convince. I hope people read this stuff, all of that. It feels nice. It's great when people connect with it. So maybe that's a good place to leave it, Kev, for next time. And maybe we can go into a little bit, I know we were going to talk about summoning a UFO. I think that would be interesting topic to go into, but maybe we'll leave it
Well,
here for now.
no, we'll leave it here, but just as a teaser, you mentioned the dream substance that our bodies generate, and yeah, that's an explanation for the supernatural and UFOs and all that, and you'll learn all about it in our next episode.
Well, we shall do that, Kev. I'm going to hit record, stop recording, and
Okay.
let me just stop recording here.